Something is seriously amiss when the very individuals who once passionately supported a leader begin to openly denounce him. This is precisely the situation unfolding with Starmer as former, now disillusioned. Supporters are using social media and public demonstrations to express their discontent. This voter rebellion is a clear signal that cannot be ignored. The question is no longer whether Starmer can recover from this crisis, but whether he can even survive it. What has caused this mass departure of supporters? While many are deeply concerned about their family's health care, Starmer is promising the Ukrainian president a vague peace deal with Russia, a stark contrast to Donald Trump's position. Meanwhile, as people struggle to keep up with rising bills, rumors of the National Health Service, NHS, being included in a United States trade deal ominously loom over the political landscape. Reform United Kingdom, under the leadership of Nigel Farage, has surged to 21% in the polls, a clear indication that the public has had enough. These numbers cannot be dismissed as a mere blip. This is a full-blown crisis for Starmer and his team. Let's be honest, the gap between Labour and Reform has shrunk dramatically since the July election, and the implications of this are staggering. This is not just a temporary dip in popularity. It reflects a seismic shift in political allegiance. The truly alarming part is not just the numbers themselves, but who is abandoning Labour. These are not merely new voters flocking to Reform. They are the very individuals who placed their trust in Starmer, who believed in his promises, and who gave him his mandate. Now they are jumping ship in record numbers. The demographic breakdown is particularly damning for Labour. Working-class voters, the very people Labour is supposed to represent, are leaving in droves. These communities have been Labour strongholds for generations, and they are now crumbling because they feel completely let down by Starmer's leadership. Behind closed doors, Labour members of Parliament are panicking, fully aware of what these polling numbers mean for their political futures. Sir John Curtis, a respected polling expert, has articulated the gravity of the situation perfectly. We have never previously had a government starting with quite as low a share of the vote as Labour did in July. This is not normal political turbulence. We are in completely uncharted territory. The collapse of Starmer's personal approval ratings is perhaps even more shocking. Since July, his numbers have plummeted to a negative approval rating of -38%. These are numbers that keep political strategists awake at night, scrambling to figure out how to stop the bleeding. It is important to understand that this is not merely the usual midterm blues. We are not even 6 months into Starmer's term. This fundamental collapse in support occurred almost immediately after the election, and voters are looking for immediate solutions to the serious problems facing the country. Starmer's Labour has utterly failed to deliver. British voters are tired of waiting. They are fed up with excuses and politicians who say one thing to get elected only to do something entirely different once in power. The alarming part for Starmer and his team is that these poll numbers do not exist in a vacuum. They represent real people who have reached their breaking point, real voters who trusted Labour with their vote and now feel betrayed. They are real families struggling under Starmer's leadership, and they have decided they have had enough. Now, let's take a close look at some of these former Starmer supporters who are now voicing their criticisms. Behind every percentage point drop in these polls lies a person with a story, someone who believed in Starmer's vision for Britain and has now been left bitterly disappointed. These are not just anonymous poll respondents, they are real Labour voters who have reached their breaking point. While Starmer jets around meeting foreign leaders, the people who put their trust in him are taking to social media with a brutal message: "You have betrayed us." Consider John from Manchester. Just last week he posted what thousands are thinking: "I voted for change, but all I see is the same old politics. Starmer has lost touch with the very people who put him in power." John's frustration is emblematic of a growing trend of voters who feel abandoned after believing in Labour's promises, and he is far from alone. Sarah, who was interviewed on a local news program, expressed her discontent. "I had high hopes for Starmer, but his focus on international issues like Ukraine, while ignoring our struggles at home, feels like a betrayal. We need a leader who prioritizes us first." Disillusionment is spreading rapidly, with former supporters using words like betrayal to describe their feelings toward the Prime Minister they once championed. Clear patterns emerge when you look at what these former supporters are saying. And they talk about fundamental issues, feeling ignored by their elected government while struggling economically without relief. They watch as Starmer prioritizes international photo opportunities while domestic services crumble. These aren't just minor policy disagreements, these are profound expressions of disappointment from people who see their hospitals unable to schedule basic operations. One moment that pushed many over the edge was the swirling rumors about NHS trade deals. A voter expressed their outrage succinctly. "If he sells out the NHS, he's lost my vote for good." The NHS represents a cornerstone of British values, and the mere suggestion that Starmer might compromise healthcare has triggered intense backlash among the Labour base. It is fascinating to observe how quickly perceptions of Starmer have flipped. Back in July, he was viewed as a breath of fresh air after years of Tory chaos. Now voters are using words like disappointment and more of the same. One former supporter lamented, "I expected a fresh approach, but it feels like we are just getting more of the same." The gap between what people thought they were voting for and what they are actually getting is massive. They expected a leader who would prioritize their concerns, fix the NHS, and improve their lives. Instead, they feel they have a prime minister more focused on international appearances than on helping people struggling at home. That sense of betrayal cuts deep and is not something voters forget easily. These individual stories represent thousands of voters who feel let down by the leader they once trusted. They are not merely expressing quiet disapproval, they are actively speaking out, sharing their stories, and encouraging others to do the same. This is a growing movement of the disillusion that threatens Labour's newfound power. Among the myriad broken promises that are making Labour voters furious, one stands out: the fate of the NHS. While thousands struggle to get basic healthcare appointments, serious questions are emerging about whether Starmer's government is quietly preparing to offer up parts of our national health service in American trade deals. Mixed messages from Labour ministers have left former supporters terrified.